Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. A WTTW News investigation into major patient safety citations at Roseland Hospital, including multiple deaths.
Your divisiveness and your brutality are not welcome here.
Legal challenges might lie ahead for a new law limiting federal immigration enforcement in Illinois.
There's a system, one that grocery stores and tech companies built together. It learns from every purchase.
And why some customers buying the same items at the same grocery store are paying different prices. First off tonight, as Customs and Border Patrol agents return to Chicago along with their chief, Greg Bavino, to re-up their immigration operations, Governor J.B. Pritzker says he believes the state is better prepared now than when Operation Midway Blitz began a couple of months ago.
We also have a population that knows how to react when their community is being invaded, and we've seen people step up. I'm so proud of the people of Illinois for doing as they have, which is to protect their neighborhoods.
Pritzker also says the state has some new laws to better protect residents that didn't exist when immigration raids began in September. So far, the governor says the federal agency has given his office no notice that agents would be returning. Immigration rights advocates and rapid response teams report ICE presence in the Little Village neighborhood this morning, and others say several people were picked up today in Cicero, Brighton Park, and back of the yards. For more on this story, please visit our website. A stinging defeat for Mayor Brandon Johnson as a rival city budget proposal advances. The members of City Council's Finance Committee passed the proposal 22-13 today, aiming to bridge Chicago's billion-dollar budget gap without hiking taxes on large companies. The plan calls for $473 million in new taxes and relies on $35 million in revenue from advertising on city light poles and other public places. It also calls for the city to collect an additional $89 million from residents who owe the city ambulance payments, utility bills, red light camera tickets, and other debt. The mayor is rejecting the proposal to increase the city's debt collection efforts. There are just 14 days left before the deadline to avoid an unprecedented shutdown of city government. Neighbors living near the future Illinois Quantum Microelectronics Park say they deserve a vote on whether the facility is built.
We do not want to be displaced by rising rents, property taxes, and speculative investors buying up our homes. We do not want to shoulder higher energy bills for a facility that will consume enough power to serve over 200,000 homes.
The group Southside Together says it's gathered over 300 petition signatures to place a referendum on the March 2026 ballot in certain ward precincts so that residents can vote on whether elected officials should halt construction. Residents say the park's approval process hasn't included the community, and they have concerns over rising energy prices, affordability, and environmental remediation. Illinois residents buying health insurance through the state's marketplace are getting more time to sign up. Officials with Get Covered Illinois are extending the open enrollment deadline to December 31st. The coverage will begin January 1st. Residents also have until January 15th to sign up for coverage that would take effect February 1st. Consumers will likely see a spike in the cost of their plans as Congress has so far failed to extend federal subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year. Check out our website for information on free enrollment support. Up next, a troubling pattern at a far south side hospital. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A troubling pattern of lapses in patient care at a local safety net hospital, including multiple resulting in deaths. That's the finding of a new WTTW News investigation into Roseland Community Hospital on the far south side. In one instance, a patient who regulators say the hospital failed to properly monitor and keep from leaving is now charged with murder. Now, please be aware, this story also includes discussion of suicide. Our Nick Blumberg joins us now with more. Nick, tell us the details of that case.
Well, Brandis, we spent several weeks going through hospital regulatory reports, police reports, court filings, and more to learn about the case of a South suburban man named Paul Patton. Now, according to records we obtained, he called 911 in October during a heated argument with his wife, Jalola. Patton said he'd been drinking heavily and was worried he might harm himself or his wife. He was taken by ambulance to Roseland Community Hospital. Regulatory reports show a patient clearly matching Patton's description was taken to the emergency department. Now, since Patton said he was suicidal, there are a number of steps that regulators and experts say should be taken to ensure his safety. That includes taking him to a private area, putting one-on-one monitoring in place, as well as a suicide assessment. The report we obtained shows none of those things happened. Now, after about an hour and a half, documents show Patton left the hospital, returned home, and got into another argument with his wife. Prosecutors say he then fatally stabbed his wife while she was on the phone with 911. Patton now faces 2 counts of first-degree murder. His attorney did not respond to a request for comment, and we were unable to get in contact with anyone from the Patton family.
Nick, what kind of consequences could the hospital face for failing to monitor a suicide patient?
Well, Roseland has already been hit with what's called an immediate jeopardy finding. That is the most serious possible citation under federal guidelines. It means a healthcare facility failed in a way that did or was likely to cause serious harm and that needs immediate correction. Now, WTTW News and ProPublica previously reported on those kinds of citations and other neglect allegations at Roseland. In the 3 years since that story, records we obtained from the state public health department show Roseland has received at least 4 more immediate jeopardy citations, including in Patton's case. Now, in another instance, regulators say the hospital failed to properly stabilize a pregnant patient before transferring her to another hospital. She subsequently lost that baby. Another case revolves around someone being treated for a possible drug overdose who was discharged after becoming hostile and left unattended in a waiting area for several hours, despite some staffers warning they appeared unwell. Now, the 4th case involves a person with mental illness who was discharged to the wrong location and whose legal guardian wasn't properly notified of their treatment.
And Nick, what do community members hope to see?
Well, there's a petition with more than 1,500 signatures. It was launched by a neighborhood activist calling for a new hospital CEO and leadership. They also want the state to step in and provide some oversight here, as well as for the community to have a say in any potential leadership changes through an advisory board or something similar like that. And we should note, Brandis, that Roseland did not respond to multiple requests for comment.
Okay, some concerning issues there. Nick Blumberg, thank you.
Thank you.
And you can read Nick's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. A new Illinois law is barring federal immigration officials from making civil arrests in or around courthouses, hospitals, college campuses, and daycares. It also provides legal steps for people who believe their constitutional rights were violated during an immigration arrest to sue federal agents. While it's already in effect, some are certain that the law itself will be headed to court. Joining us now by Zoom for more on the legal questions around this measure is Chicago-Kent College of Law professor Harold Krent. Harold, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So what is the likelihood that federal agents will actually heed this Illinois law and they actually won't arrest people outside or around or in courthouses?
Well, they can arrest individuals around courthouses, but they have to have a judicial warrant first. But obviously what the legislature is trying to do is head off this collision or clash that we've seen of ICE agents or Border Patrol agents coming into the court, disrupting court relations, and grabbing individuals who were there to testify. This obviously is undermining the sanctity of Illinois' justice system. And under our system of federalism in this country, Illinois has a right to make sure that the locus of power, the court system, state government, is free to function. And therefore, Illinois has an excellent argument that the Illinois law is indeed constitutional because the federal government cannot disrupt the core functions of state government, such as the judicial system.
Okay, so let's say more about that, because as you've said, federal government officials under the Trump administration, they argue that this law violates the supremacy clause of the Constitution. Even Illinois Democrats acknowledge that this law is probably going to be challenged in court. Will this hold up when that happens?
I think this part of the law will. I think other parts may not. But I think there is a balance here between the supremacy clause, which says a federal law is superior to state law. But at the same time, the 10th Amendment of our Constitution preserves to the states the ability to have the essential functions of government run, operate, and certainly the judiciary qualifies. So unless there is a judicial warrant, ICE officials cannot go around and grab people away from the courthouse.
Republican State Senator John Curran went as far as to say that this is going to get set aside by the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you think it'll get that high?
Well, there's several other states that have similar laws, so there are a couple of cases that are now percolating. So I am not surprised that this will see a judicial challenge. I'd be surprised if it didn't see a judicial challenge. And I think the federal courts will have a difficult job sort of accommodating the supremacy clause with the right of the states to govern themselves. But in this particular instance, I think there's such a tradition of preserving the integrity and viability of the state judicial system that it goes too far for federal agents without a warrant to come and grab somebody disrupting the state judicial system itself. So I think it will be challenged in federal court. I think ultimately Illinois has a very good chance of prevailing, as do the other states with similar laws.
So the other states with similar laws, California and New York, they also have laws that restrict civil immigration arrests at courthouses. What do we know about what happened when those laws were challenged?
There has been one judicial decision so far in New York by the federal district court. That court held that the state was well within its rights to preserve the integrity of the judicial system. Of course, that's going to be appealed to the Court of Appeals. So it's at an early stage of the litigation. I'm sure that this one will follow suit.
Now, this law, because you mentioned, there are other parts that may or may not hold up in court. This law also opens the door to litigation against federal officials who, quote, knowingly violated constitutional rights during civil immigration enforcement operations. One critique is that this could have unintended consequences for local law enforcement. What could that look like?
Well, I'm not sure about the consequences for local law enforcement per se, but I do think the consequences for federal law enforcement are pretty grave, and I think that this part of the law will be more difficult to uphold. Basically, Congress has created a system for individuals to sue when they're deprived of their constitutional rights by state officials, but they haven't done so for federal officials. But on the other hand, Congress has waived the sovereign immunity of the federal government for tort suits against federal officials. So they've made a kind of comprehensive study of where to allow federal suit, where not to allow federal suit. And so I think they're going to argue, that means the federal government's going to argue, that Congress has already considered the issue and it has not permitted suit in this particular instance, so that the state effort to give a remedy to individuals who have been injured grievously by the actions of these federal agents will be preempted by the federal law. That's my prediction. I think it may be another close case, but as a result, there may be no kind of damages liability for people who are injured by unconstitutional conduct by these federal officers. We've seen that with detention. We've seen that with people getting knocked over in the streets by Border Patrol agents, by ICE agents. And again, it seems unclear that they're going to have that the federal government will allow this state cause of action to go forward. I think the recourse will be to file actions in federal court against the federal officials. But that remains to be seen, and that's going to be teed off for litigation as well.
Okay. So additionally, this law requires public colleges and universities, hospitals, child care facilities to set up policies for dealing with immigration enforcement. And it mostly prohibits some of them from disclosing the immigration status of students, patients, parents, and children. What policies restricting federal immigration enforcement are already in place for these areas, these places?
So this reminds me of the sanctuary city litigation that Chicago was embroiled in a number of years ago during the first Trump administration, because the line to be followed there is that local law officials cannot be dragooned or cannot be forced to cooperate with federal immigration agents, but they can't impede them. So these policies, these structures, as long as they don't say you can't ignore a request from the federal government, I think are lawful. And they're saying basically you can't knowingly disclose this information, you can't keep a public register of this information, but if there is a judicial subpoena for the information, then the hospitals and the educational systems would have to comply. So read in that light, I think that this is similar to the sanctuary city litigation, which Chicago won. And so the line to be drawn, again, is that the hospitals and the educational institutions don't have to go out of the way to help federal immigration authorities, but they can't block a legitimate judicial subpoena at the same time.
Okay, that's what we'll have to leave it. Obviously, we will keep an eye on this one and see how it plays out in court if and when that day comes. We'll have you back then. Harold Krent, thanks again for joining us.
All right, take care, Grams.
Same to you. Up next, how Instacart's AI pricing could be inflating your grocery bill. Grocery shoppers may want to check their receipts the next time they order from Instacart. A new study shows the same items bought from the same grocery store using the Instacart app could have several different prices. The research from Consumer Reports, Groundwork Collective, and More Perfect Union found that the company made pricing decisions based on third-party information about users' shopping behavior. On average, a family of 4 that used Instacart for groceries could see yearly expenses increased by nearly $1,200 due to so-called surveillance-based pricing. Joining us now to explain are Claire Johnson-Raba, Assistant Professor of Law at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and on Zoom, Eric Gardner, business reporter for More Perfect Union. That's a nonprofit education, advocacy, and journalism organization focused on the working class. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, Eric, you worked with, as we mentioned, Consumer Reports and Groundwork Collective on this study for 6 months. What did you find out about how companies are charging consumers for groceries?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what this really story set out to do was try to figure out, is Instacart charging people different prices for different items? And to kind of answer that question, we did, a big test with about 400 individuals, 427, where we all got online at the same time, identified the same 20 items, went to the same store, same location, and loaded them up in the basket. And at the end of it, we kind of took screenshots of everything and tracked how much everything cost and what people were charged. And we found pretty widespread, as you described there. Essentially what the system does is puts people into what we're calling pricing groups. So that means when you log into Instacart, for whatever reason, you're assigned a different price group. And to give people a sense of what that gap is, in some tests, there's about 7 different price groups, distinct ones where everyone was charged the same amount for the same product. And on the low end, some folks paid about $114 for the 20 items, and on the high end, about $124 on the high end. And we reached out to Instacart for comment, and they claim that it is all random testing that retailers are doing around trying to find the optimal price points for items. But as we started this investigation, we realized that they have an extensive patent portfolio that basically breaks customers down into different buying behaviors, purchasing patterns, kind of more or less this whole profile about who you are, and then assigns them to different, essentially, groups.
So, yeah, what you're referring to is this sophisticated customer segmentation technology. What does that mean for shoppers to be grouped this way?
Yeah, I think what it means is that, I think there's this idea within America that when you go shopping, especially something like groceries, that you're paying a price that the retailer kind of identified to kind of get people in the door. And unfortunately, as times have evolved and technology has evolved, it couldn't be farther from the truth. You're really kind of engaged in kind of a mass test at all times to understand what is the maximum amount of profit that a company, or the perfect price point to extract the maximum amount of profit. And online, it's done at an individual level. As we started researching and investigating, we found it's actually in stores as well at a store level, meaning for a chain that has 100 stores, they may be running these different price tests across each individual store to kind of determine the optimal price point.
Claire, as Eric says, the report found that Instacart is using third-party information to do this sort of pricing, this customer segmentation into different groups, different price points. For example, a dozen Lucerne eggs sold for 5 different prices, ranging from $3.99 to $4.79 on Instacart, all at the same Safeway store in Washington, D.C. The patents revealed that algorithms were would be based on customer shopping behavior to adjust those prices rather than demographic information like race or gender. How are these different? How is one legal and the other one is not?
Okay. Well, so we always say that if you don't know what the product is, you are the product. So we know that our data is being collected and sold sort of throughout the ways that we use the internet and that we interact with various companies. So we know that the third-party companies are selling some of this data. From a consumer protection standpoint, we have laws both at the federal and state level to protect consumers from this kind of misrepresentation and this kind of deceptive advertising. One of the biggest concerns that I saw in the report is that there are sort of false discounts, that it was stating that the original price of something was $5.39, but Instacart was offering it for $3.99. And that's illegal under the Illinois Deceptive Trade Practices Act, and it also violates the federal FTC Act, which protects consumers against unfairness in the marketplace. So from a consumer protection standpoint, this Instacart, and if they're colluding with these retailers, they're engaging in deceptive practices that allow them to get a leg up over other vendors who might be being fair in the marketplace and being transparent about their pricing.
So even though it is not that sort of demographic-based algorithm, which is illegal, right? You can't change prices for someone based on their gender or race, any of that stuff. Even though it's not that, there's a chance, it sounds like, that this is still illegal and in violation.
It could certainly violate consumer protection statutes. However, we also know that there's bias built into algorithms, right? So even if something is not at an individual level identifying someone by race or gender or age, geographic areas can be proxies. Also, if we know sort of the general credit score of a neighborhood, that can be a proxy for race as well. So some of these data points that are happening at the aggregate level that More Perfect Union noticed, that may still be engaging in discriminatory practices through the algorithm.
Eric, customers, we already pay surveillance or algorithm-based pricing for airplane tickets, hotels, large events like concerts. But researchers surveyed more than 2,200 people and found that 72% of people who have used Instacart in the previous year did not want the company to charge different users different prices for any reason. What makes it different? Why might people respond differently over groceries versus airline tickets or hotel prices?
Yeah, I think there's something visceral around groceries, right? Like when it comes to airlines or like movie tickets or concert tickets, like there's always the option or the argument people will make, well, you don't need to do that. You can take a train, you can take a bus. But when it comes to food, like there's no other option. You have to eat. And so I think, when people find out that people are being charged different amounts for the same products at the same time, it kind of gets at kind of the core of unfairness and kind of a practice that shouldn't be adopted.
Claire, can state and federal governments, could they regulate surveillance pricing? Is there something they need to be doing in response to this new information?
Well, indeed they can. And New York just passed an anti-surveillance pricing, anti-algorithmically placed price law. However, that's a disclosure-based law, and so it doesn't really have any teeth. You can't sue under it if you're harmed. It requires a disclosure by retailers if they're setting an algorithmically organized price. However, our marketplace and fair trade is premised on this idea that consumers should have enough information that they can vote with their feet. And as Eric pointed out, that's really difficult when it comes to groceries. And so if the prices themselves themselves are deceptive and misleading, then I think we can look at things like the unfair and deceptive acts and practices laws that exist at the state level, and again, the FTC Act at the federal level that prohibits unfair and deceptive marketing.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. This is fascinating. I'm dying to know what the what retailers know about me, but we'll have to leave it there for now. Eric Gardner and Claire Johnson-Raba, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Before we go, a word about our colleague Fletcher Garrett. Fletcher died yesterday after being hospitalized most of this month. Fletcher was a maintenance engineer here at WTTW. That means he helped keep all of our equipment up and running so that we can bring you Chicago Tonight and everything else we do here at WTTW. Beyond his outstanding work and work ethic, Fletcher was a genuinely warm and caring person, a friend to everyone he met. Our thoughts are with his mother, sister, extended family, and many friends. And of course, we will miss you, Fletcher. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. We'll have the latest on where contentious city budget negotiations stand as a possible Chicago government shutdown creeps closer. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that gives back to its community in Chicago and beyond.